Wow. Welcome, and thank you for joining us to celebrate and remember our father, Major General Retired Peter James Boylan, Jr., and a life well lived. We all know it's difficult to lose a loved one, but it seems more challenging when you really, really like the guy. Thank you to all the people of Milledgeville, Baldwin County, the surrounding counties, and the state of Georgia for welcoming and adopting our parents into this lovely community. Our family moved frequently during our childhood, part of being an Army family, so we're happy that our parents found a home here in Georgia. They love it here and have enjoyed the life they built here over the past 30-plus years. Finally, let me say thank you to my 3 sisters and brother and their families. My 3 sisters were the rock of support for my mom and dad over these past 3 months. My sisters are the ones that made this event happen. And my brother Greg and I, my sisters and Rick Williams and his team, and my brother Greg and I did our best to do what we were told with lots of coaching from both our wives, Pam and Colleen. So thank you, family. Thank you, Mom. My dad wrote a book in 2018 titled Chits in My Bucket, Why Virtue Matters. There are a couple buckets with small pieces of paper just outside the church. And Dad called these pieces of paper chits. If you've not already, before you depart, please be sure to write down a word, a memory, a virtue, or inspiration you have of our dad, and put your chit in the bucket. To further describe this idea of chits in the bucket, please allow me a couple quotes from his book. From the foreword, it has been noted that in times of national crisis, when the life of the nation is at stake, it is not so much the weapons of the soldiers that ensure its survival, as is the character of its leaders. Such character, or virtue, is only gained by diligent, focused effort, described as chits. They accumulate over time, thus filling a bucket of character. And let me share one of Dad's personal chits that I experienced. And I quote, "I learned there are better ways of communicating virtue, particularly to my children, specifically doing away with the idea that if you lie to me, I will beat the crap out of you, and supplanting that with the thought of achieving personal excellence of gaining chits." I was the lesson learned. He did that after me. I developed my concept of chits and began to think more deeply about virtues and the development of character in leaders. So thank you for participating in that special way to remember our father, my dad. Another treasured memory of my father revolves around a small book written in 1899 by Elbert Hubbard titled A Message to Garcia. Dad bestowed this book on his children at an appropriate and impactful moment in each of our lives, along with meaningful and insightful words of wisdom. He used this book and its lessons on leadership and doing the thing, carrying the message, throughout his professional careers, both in and out of the military. I personally received my copy when I graduated from West Point in 1984. The lessons: be proactive, do the thing. The conditions in our circle of influence are ripe for our action and our contribution. Be responsible. It is our values and virtues that should guide our choices. Take the initiative. Simply do the thing. Carry the message. And then, what can I contribute so that others can flourish? What actions are needed around me? These lessons Dad imbued in his family and everyone with whom he came in contact over his lifetime. I'm grateful for them. We have several wonderful people that will share memories of Dad this afternoon. We are grateful for their participation and contributions in remembering him. Thank you for your time and words. I would now like to introduce Father Brian Kerr, pastor of Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Milledgeville. My parents have been active parishioners of Sacred Heart since their arrival in Milledgeville in 1992, and we asked Father Brian to share an opening prayer. So if you would, please stand with me now. Welcome Father Bryant for our opening prayer.
Let us pray. Lord our God, the death of our brother Peter recalls our human condition and the brevity of our lives on earth. But for those who believe in your love, death is not the end, nor does it destroy the bonds that you forge in our lives. We share the faith of your Son's disciples and the hope of the children of God. Bring the light of Christ's resurrection to this time of testing and pain, as we pray for Peter and for those who love him. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Morning, all. My name is Fred Van Horn, friend of the family for many years. General Boylan and I first met in 1988 at Fort Drum, New York. I served under his command and was his chief of staff for 2 years in the 10th Mountain Division, and then rejoined his family, and his friendship in 1995 when I came here to Georgia Military College. Since it took me 5 minutes to get to the podium, Pete's going to tell me my time is up. But I think I'll persist. Many of you may know the author Douglas Southall Freeman. He's a man, a biographer, who wrote a biography of George Washington and Robert E. Lee. And during a lecture at the Naval War College in the 1950s, one of the students asked him to define character for them. He gave probably the finest definition of that word I've ever heard. In it, he said, it is that quality of man which is going to make a man in an hour of strain do the courageous and do the just and do the generous thing. I know it was well before General Boylan's time, but Professor Freeman must have known that such a man like General Boylan was going to come along, and he must have written this definition knowing that, and with people coming into the future in mind. He goes on in his definition to say that character is the essence of all that a man has seen in life and regards as high and exalted. For Peter Boylan, high and exalted meant his faith, his country, his family, his friends, the 82nd Airborne Division, and Georgia Military College. Those were his passions and remain so through his life. If you chose to disparage any one of those, then my advice to you then and now was to stand back and, using a naval term, prepare for ram. There was going to be a ball of fire headed your way in the form of a word or an action, you can be sure. Those were his passions. He and I traveled a lot together. Our passion was trout fishing. We moved back and forth between the rivers of North Georgia, western North Carolina, and eastern Tennessee on a fairly regular basis. And that means that we spent a lot of time on the drive to and from. Conversations were rich. We talked about books and music, talked about family and people, things we'd done right, things we had not done well, but most of all about family. And I think if you hang around for a little bit, you'll see a picture of his family flashed up here. All of them. He loved his family. My job was to ask the first question, how's the family? That would start off the inventory. He would go from the oldest all the way down to the youngest grandchild. That's about an hour and a half on the road. Heaven help us if in between fishing trips another grandchild had come along, because that added another 10 minutes to the session. But he loved them and he was proud of them. Every bit of description of his children and his grandchildren was filled with superlatives, and with almost tears in his eyes, he would give the full and the whole story. But he would reach a point every time in the story where he wanted to talk about the only person in the world he thought should be elevated to sainthood, and that was his Kathy. You'll have to remember that this man commanded an infantry division with 10,000 men in it. He went to war with the 82nd Airborne Division. Never once in our conversations about the 10th Mountain and the 82nd Airborne did I hear him use the word amazing. But when his Kathy's name came up, amazing was every second word. He was enthralled with her enthusiasm and her energy, and didn't understand how she could handle the hundreds of things she seemed to take on without complaint. It was an expression of love for her and for all of the children that dominated most of our conversations to and from. In Freeman's definition of character, he goes on to say that character is the starting point from which we go on. In my first official meeting with Peter Boylan, President Boylan at the time, when I got to Georgia Military College in 1995, I walked into his office. He motioned me to a seat, We locked eyes, and there were several seconds, long seconds of silence. You know what that silence means. That means I'm getting ready to tell you something I want you to pay attention to. I want you to understand it, and then I want you to go out there and do something about it. That was the way Peter Boylan worked. I understood that. I'd been in front of him before on many occasions for both good and bad reasons. His first sentence came out, it was one word. You've already heard Pete mentioned it in his introductory remarks. That one word in that one word sentence was character. He said, that's a word I want to hear a lot around here, and I want to hear a lot of it in the lower grades in particular. Out of that was born the Georgia Military College Character Word of the Week and a regimental accolade and many other character development initiatives that were added to the already large number that had come into the college by way of its founding in 1879 and is still continued today as good things are made better and new things are added on. But it was all about character. In that statement, character is the starting point from which we go on. He put me to work. The regimental accolade was one of those things. And I would argue that although buildings are important, although the regreening of a campus is important, and those things are of great value, and they give Milledgeville reason to be proud of Georgia Military College and the state of Georgia to reason to be proud of that college as an educational institution. It wasn't all about buildings for Peter Boylan. The most important thing about him was how are we going to accomplish our mission to contribute to the character development of all of these students, middle school and high school and junior college, who are going to pass under our gaze. And he gave full attention over my time with him and over his more than 20 years at Georgia Military College. I think there are thousands and thousands of students out there in the world now raising their own families, out there in the military serving their nation, filling state and federal office positions, running businesses of their own, making success out of everything that they touch, but buried in their collective memories and in their individual memories is that one regimental accolade. It goes something like this. A student, when passing a teacher or someone in authority, was expected to greet them with that, "Character above all, sir." And the one being greeted was expected to respond, "3 words to live by." And the student was expected to reply again by saying, "Duty, honor, and country." I think the memory of that accolade will never be erased from the memory of any student who passed through Georgia Military College. And with that memory in mind, they will attack the hard things that they face in life, and they will call upon it to remind them of direction when it comes to right and wrong decisions. And those thousands will turn into more generations and more generations after that. So that's why I think his contribution there was more valuable than just buildings, as important as buildings are. He himself was a man of great character, and he set out to do what he could to pass that on, not only to his family, as Pete has mentioned already, but to all of those around him. Ambassador Claire Booth Luce once mused that great men own or deserve at least one line in the history books. I'll leave it to you to decide how that one line ought to be written about Peter Boylan. I've already written my line. I've already placed it in my memory of life, in my book of life here and in here. And it reads like this: Peter Boylan was my friend.
I'm Sonny Harmon. I worked for General Boylan from 1992 to 2013 when he retired. You're probably wondering what an old coach is doing up here, but I tell you, if you live long enough, they'll let you do just about anything. So that's the way it is. And I want to thank the Boylans for giving me this opportunity to speak today. It means a lot. It's not about buildings. He stole my thunder, but I want to take us back to 92, 93, 94, because at that time, the school was in such disrepair that the general was thinking a little bit about buildings at that time because the roofs were leaking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The main ingredient that he had when he came to GMC was heart. And he managed us with heart. He led with heart. He was always about that. His heart was always with the people that he led. The faculty and staff meetings early on were really interesting because we never met a man of this stature who could also let his feelings out. And he would do that in the faculty staff meetings early on. This is long before Whitfield Hall met its demise, trust me, back in 92. I think the physical plant that he saw each time he looked out the window made him mad and sad at the same time because the school was in such disrepair. And him being a military guy, he didn't like that. One building in particular he could not escape when he looked out the president's window was Whitfield Hall. And he used to talk about it in the faculty and staff meetings. It was a building built back in the 1930s. My God, it had mildew and everything else. And I think he knew intuitively that when he no longer saw that building, that he had been successful in his endeavor. Today, when you look out the president's window across the grass parade field, Colonel Van Horn, you see, instead of Whitfield Hall, Peter Boylan Hall. And that was, to me, his way of getting the recognition he needed from just looking out there and seeing Peter Boylan Hall. It wasn't named that at the time, but it is now. His mission was accomplished. Many times his voice would break when he talked about rebuilding the school. He'd say things like, somebody didn't take care of the darn roofs, or I'm going to get rid of that building before it's the last thing I do, or where's Ed Moore? Where's Ed Moore? You know, he'll take care of it. Ed Moore was always the go-to guy back in those days, and he did a fantastic job. But the atmosphere in the faculty and staff meeting in that old auditorium was just thick with his emotions. Now, we sat there dumbfounded because really what was on our minds was, where's that next paycheck coming from? Where's that next paycheck? His vision was so far ahead of where we were, we just, were, like I say, we were just dumbfounded. But he had such confidence in himself and his ability to do the job that he just sort of brought us along. We didn't really deserve to be there. He was more than we deserved. He brought us along. That was the kind of man he was. And slowly over the course of months and years, respect for him grew, and eventually it turned into love. We worked harder just because of who he was, just General Boylan. You would do anything for him, and it was just his character. It was absolutely unbelievable. But there was another person present at those times, Ms. V, as I call her, and she was there and helped maintain his sanity through those early years when it was touch and go, I'm sure. She was dealing with a myriad of problems. They both were with the school. And she would do something that I doubt if she even realizes what was happening, but she would have us over as a faculty and staff. She would invite us over to their house on special occasions. Now, that was a big deal to a lot of people. And we saw the two of them working together as a team, you know, husband and wife. She was his partner. And it helped us get a better idea of what teamwork was all about. And I thank you for those years. They were truly a blessing to me. I really enjoyed them. Lastly, the general's intellect was legendary. I remember hearing the word inculcate. He loved that word. And I was sitting with a bunch of coaches in the faculty staff meeting, and when we heard the word inculcate come out of his mouth, we looked around like, what did he say? What was that? We didn't know what that word meant. We learned so many words from that man. But we learned through the definition of that word, through his persistent efforts to impress on us the importance of saving that institution and how important that institution was going to be. And in fact, it is. It's a very important institution to this day. It was a get your minds right sort of message. He was inculcating us with the desire to get your minds right, get on the bandwagon. Around the turn of the century, his back problems began to worsen. This is, again, about his intellect. And he would spend many hours in the MRI machine. Well, I had an incident in 2002 where my elbow was bothering me, so I had an MRI. It lasted for like 30, 35 minutes. A couple days later, I saw him up on the driving range hitting golf balls, and you never missed out on an opportunity to talk to the general. So I go over there and say, "Sir, how you doing?" I said, I just had one of those MRIs. Took 30, 35 minutes. I said, I barely made it through that. He said, "Sonny, when I have an MRI, it lasts for hours. It lasts for hours." And I said, "Well, what do you do? How do you pass the time?" He said, "I do math problems. I do math problems." And I'm thinking, what happens to me after 10 times 10? Where am I going to go with this? He was just a brilliant man. He was the true servant leader, if you know anything about leadership. And as you look around this room right now, you can see many of the people he allowed to lead and grow and prosper under his leadership. Most people are content to spend just a few minutes in the presence of greatness, to be near the seat of power for a short period of time. We were given that special gift in General Boylan. He allowed us to become part of his dream, that of saving a school very much worth saving. He left many legacies, and one of those sits between two gates at the southern part of town, our main campus. A testimony to what one man can do with perseverance, a godly wife, and people who learn to love him.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Sherwood. I am a history faculty member at GMC. I've been there for 19 years, so I missed some of the early years of President Boylan's experiences there, but I've heard some wonderful stories, and I'm going to share a few that have directly impacted me. Sonny was talking about faculty and staff meetings. These were always interesting. One of the things that most people probably do not know is that not only was President Boylan very, very smart, he would actually ask us faculty and staff members grammar questions in the middle of the meetings. He'd call out a faculty member and say, "Professor so-and-so, please stand up." And let's say it was a math professor. And he would ask him questions about English grammar. It was utterly terrifying because you had no idea what type of question you might get. I share that story with you to emphasize one point. President Boylan not only wanted us to know our discipline that we taught, but he wanted us to be well-rounded people. And I think that's a trait that all of us who have spent time with him can see. He was a builder of people. He was a man of faith, a man of his family, and everything he did was to build others, whether it was a physical structure or emotionally. I do remember times, another time to be absolutely terrified of President Boylan. He had a propensity to kind of wander the hallways. If he didn't have a meeting or if a meeting was canceled, he'd just kind of wander the hallways and pop into your classroom in the middle of class. So as a very young faculty member, who I am sure bored to tears many of my former students, it was utterly terrifying to see that door open and his face pop in. And then to be very polite, do you mind if I join in? What am I going to say? No? It was terrifying. And he would sit down, and after he'd come up and say, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I don't know what I said. I was just reading from my lecture notes. I was a terrible professor. But the fact that even after me being so nervous in those moments, he took the time to thank me was really important. As has already been mentioned, one of his tremendous loves was character development and character refinement. I had the privilege of working with President Boylan early in my time as a professor to help start the Ethics Bowl. This is something that had been going on at 4-year colleges for an extensive period of time. But President Boylan decided it was a good idea to get 2-year schools involved. So we tried very hard and went out to Colorado and got absolutely destroyed by the United States Air Force Academy and a couple of other schools. We came back and had a kind of an after-action report in which he decided that it wasn't quite fair that we had to play against 4-year schools who were having juniors and seniors. So out of nothing, we should start a 2-year ethics bowl for junior colleges and community colleges in the country. Within 12 months, Georgia Military College hosted the first Community College Ethics Bowl, something that is still continuing and actually GMC is participating in today in Bakersfield, California. That is a tremendous legacy. In the process of creating that, he personally, with the aid of some others, convinced New York Life that this was a great idea, and New York Life donated a sizable amount of money, not for the program, but so that other institutions who had to travel to defray part of their costs. It was that important for President Boylan that this occurred. Sonny said something that was funny. He mentioned a word, inculcate. I do remember that quite frequently. The last thing I want to mention is that I was sitting in a meeting with him one time, and this is one of my funniest memories of President Boylan. In his normal sentence, he used the words serendipity. And many of us looked around at each other and said, I think I know what that is, but we're not sure. But to prove that we knew what it was, all of us in the next comment that we said happened to all use the word serendipitous or serendipity, trying to make it work in whatever conversation we had. We got a couple of weird looks from him, so I assume we didn't use it correctly. But I just want to conclude with this. I don't think it was serendipitous that Peter and Kathy ended up here in Milledgeville. I am grateful for his life and the life of his family.
Good afternoon. I'm John Thornton. I'm retired principal of GMC Prep School in 2015. Came on board prior to General Boylan arriving, and I can honestly say, with the exception of my father, no man had a bigger impact on my life than General Boylan. I first met him in 1992 when he came on board. I was coaching football back then and was out on the football field during summer workouts. This guy comes walking up, looked like right out of Central Casting, sticks his hand out and said, John, Peter Boylan. I was amazed because prior to that, the previous general always called me Steve, always congratulated me on how well the band program was going. And short of Ronald Reagan walking up, this guy, again, right out of Central Casting, fit the bill. Throughout the 90s, we began to feel a change in the culture of GMC. Now, you can see the change in regards to buildings, structures, that type of thing, because it's physical. But the change in culture is something that has to be cultivated, it has to be nurtured, and you have to have a true leader to be able to do that. Whether it was the word of the week, whether it was the character counts buttons, some of us old-timers remember them, or whether it was just listening to him when he talked, whether it be at a faculty meeting or whatever event that he might be speaking at, he truly represented what character was all about. We used to go to Atlanta every year with the 8th grade. We'd take them up there for Georgia Day. And the kids would, be all dressed up, and we'd go up there, and General Boylan would command a crowd of politicians. It wasn't because of the uniform. It wasn't because of the stars. It was because of his personality and the friendships that he had forged with these leaders of the state at a time when GMC really needed it the most. He was able to gain their trust. He was able to gain their support. And when we would go up there for Georgia Day, you would see these politicians that would just flock to him because he knew what he was talking about. He cared about GMC, but more importantly, they trusted him with the appropriations or anything that they offered to GMC. They trusted that it would be used in a proper manner, and it was. When I became principal of GMC, I want to say that I inherited a position that was going to be easy. My predecessor, Jim LeBrun, had done a wonderful job when I was assistant principal there. One of the first duties of the principal is you needed to become very familiar with the budget. And we had budget meetings that were called PBACs. There's an acronym for that, and as the kids say nowadays, if you know, you know. It was interesting to say the very least. General Boylan knew the budget inside and out, not because of his mathematical mind. He was brilliant. But he knew that any dollar that came to GMC had to be used properly, could not be questionable in any situation, and PBAC would cover that. And he would always invite the rest of the faculty, come to a PBAC meeting sometime. Well, unless you had to be there, not many showed up because it was not, primetime TV. My first PBAC, after being named principal, just kind of blended into the crowd and just kind of, one of those things and kind of getting my feet wet. And then the second one was a one-on-one, held in December, Christmas holidays, we were about to get out. I go into his office. I wasn't prepared. Thought I was, but he started asking me a few questions. It was very obvious I did not know the answers to those questions. And he offered me some simple advice. He said, John, you need to get smart, which I did. I went back to my office, and everybody was gone except my secretary. She said, old man, how'd it go? I said, I need to get smart. So for the next couple of weeks, I more or less became engulfed with understanding the budget of the prep school. It was very important. During that time, General Boylan would call me, stop by, not to tell me what to do, but just to let me know in his own way that he supported me. And that meant the world to me, because it would have been very easy for him to discount me as, being a buffoon or not knowing what I was doing or being over my head, which certainly there was an argument for that. But he truly cared about his people. He truly cared because he wanted us to know that we were all on the same team, that our mission was all the same, and that was to help foster GMC to be the best that it could possibly be without any questions as to how we did it or the integrity of the institution. There was never a doubt that he was always, straight down the line, just a brilliant man. He would meet with our seniors at the beginning of the year. One of the first things he would ask is if you had a pencil and paper. And he would recount a story about not being prepared and the results of an early Army experience when he was not prepared. But then he would also talk to the kids. He would share a story with them about the feeling in your heart at 4 in the morning and the voices that come to you as to what means the most in life and how important that was. He talked about truth, he talked about integrity, and he shared a story of when he was in Vietnam, when one of his men did not tell the truth, and the consequences of that. Heartbreaking. But he was able to talk to these young people in a way that they were able to understand. He would visit with the kids, he'd meet with them one-on-one, he'd talk to them, he would meet with teachers. He was a very visible person on campus. He was always around. But if you ever needed advice, if you ever just needed somebody to talk to, you could always pick up the phone or go to see him. There was no wall between the president's office and his people. You were never told, make an appointment, or that you can't see the president without checking with me first. Buildings went up around GMC, the place changed, it became a truly iconic place. From the job that the engineering did to the construction process, which, believe it or not, he helped many of us, or asked many of us to become involved in. And again, before you get involved in the construction of an Ussery Hall or a kids center, especially Ussery Hall, you needed to get smart. He would visit, he'd ask questions about it, but at the end of the day, he would allow you to do your job. There was one time when there was a job opening coming up, and it was, as principal, my duty to fill the position with the best candidate possible. I asked him if he had any recommendations, any people that he knew from his vast experience in Washington and the Pentagon. And he looked at me and he said, "John, would you want 20-year teachers running the Pentagon?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, I don't want 20 people from the Pentagon coming down to run your school. You're an educator. That's what you've been trained to do, and I have complete faith in you." I never forgot that. It meant the world to me. Later on, before his retirement, I think it was maybe 2010, I might be mixed on the words, he became very ill. I mean, most people don't realize how close we came to losing him. And during that time, we would go to visit him, myself and Colonel Van Horn, to keep him in the loop as to what's going on. And he would always let me know before I left that he trusted me, that he knew we were on the right path and that we were doing the right thing, and it just meant the world to me. When he came back, we were kind of wary because he had really been sick. You know, one of our meetings, staff call, he made the remark that he felt like a mushroom. And we all knew what that meant. He did not want to be told what we thought he needed to hear. But on the other hand, he did not want to micromanage every minute of the day-to-day operation of GMC. He trusted his people, he trusted the kids, but more importantly, he trusted the mission of the school. And again, that is to produce good citizens. Our kids have gone on to do many things, whether it be the military, whether it to be go out into corporate America, but more importantly, he always knew something about the kids. He could always bring up something. He could, passing in the hall, because he was, even toward the end, that golf cart, he was always around. He would bring up, "Hey, you had a great game the other night," or, "You did a wonderful job in Odyssey of the Mind," which was wonderful. And the Fine Arts program, which he built. And all of this developed because he had his hand in it, but it was not a heavy hand. It was a caring hand, a gentle touch. I had the opportunity on a few occasions to go out to dinner with General Boylan. He'd give me a call and let's go have a beer. Sorry, in the house of the Lord. We would go have a beverage and a slice of pizza. We would talk, and he would just not try to correct me or tell me better ways to do things, but just to share that he cared and that he felt that we were in the right direction. He loved his God. He loved his family. He loved his country. And it would bring chills down your back to hear him saying, "God bless America." It was absolutely amazing. I echo the sentiments of previous guests when he talked about his love for Kathy. I remember him telling me one time that, and we did as faculty, would go over there for certain events and such, but the first time I was invited to his house for dinner with some guys from New Mexico Military Institute, generals and all the rest of this such, he looked at me with a sparkle in his eye and he said, "John, you wait till you taste Kathy's lamb chops." And they were absolutely spectacular. In closing, my thoughts and prayers to the family, to his friends. I love Peter Boylan. The community loved Peter Boylan, everything that he did. And those shoes will never be filled, but he gave all of us the confidence to continue to try to at least make an attempt to do the right thing. I'm going to miss him. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Harold Mason. There's a saying, behind every great man is a great woman. General Peter Boylan was a great man. Kathy Boylan is a great lady. The Boylans lived in our neighborhood. We were in the supper club, mystery club, and made trips together. I have lots of great memories. I know that one of General Boylan's favorite poems was The Rose. While traveling to the Georgia football games, and after a few adult beverages, he would always recite it. Years later, on a supper club trip, he asked what my favorite poem was. And of course I said, The Rose. I commented to General Boylan that if GMC ever needed a little extra support for the golf program, I would be glad to help. Well, 2 days later, I received a letter thanking me, and if I would send the donation, GMC could start a golf program. He never missed an opportunity to move GMC forward. He told me one day, he said his name was Peter. I didn't need to call him General. I told him it was not for him, it was for me. I wanted my friends to know a general knew me. GMC, Milledgeville, Baldwin County are all better because of General Peter Boylan. He gave back.
Good afternoon. My name is Muna Yu, and I am currently teaching the music at Georgia Military College. I would like to express my gratitude to Miss Kathy and Emily for this opportunity to share my story about General Boylan. The first time I met General Boylan was in the hallway on the second floor of the old OCB building in fall 1993. I remembered very vividly that the hallway was very, very dark, and there was a tall gentleman who introduced himself as the president of GMC. I was an adjunct music instructor during that time, and then I don't remember exactly how the conversation went because I was nervous. But I do remember clearly how he made me feel that I was welcomed at GMC, and that he made me feel that he cared about what I did. Since then, he has been supporting me and my music program for the past 30 years. The GMC Glee Club performed just past May the 18th, and he was there. My memories go back to when I performed countless piano concerts in the Sibley-Cohn Library for raised funds for GMC. I was so grateful that I could be a small part through my music that I have always been passionate about since I was a little girl. General Boylan loves music. I have a list of his favorite repertoires. He especially loved Beethoven. One of the fundraising benefit concerts was for the new beautiful Steinway Concert Grand D model. Once we reached the goal for the Steinway, General Boylan sent me to the Steinway factory in the New York City to select our instrument. I remember there was on a very cold winter day in 2005. Since then, that instrument was used for so many concerts at GMC. As you know, good music touches people's hearts. And this is one beautiful thing about the music. I am so grateful for General Boylan, who envisioned growing a legacy of music and fine arts at GMC. Every time when I perform either a classical piano concert or a GMC chorus concert, General Boylan asked me to close the program by asking everyone to join and sing God Bless America. As you know, that has been the tradition since then. I can feel his passion of loving America when he sang God Bless America. What he did not know is that I have seen his tears when he sang God Bless America many, many times in the Sibley room. He loves America so much, and his love of this country made me, as a Korean immigrant, love America even more. Thank you, sir. And here is your favorite tune and your favorite piece.
My name is David Sinclair, and I belong to Milledgeville in Baldwin County. I'll give you one guess where my country of origin is. Good afternoon, Kathy and the Boylan family, and all my Milledgeville and Baldwin County neighbours and friends. I have to inform you all, my good friend Peter, when he first saw me wearing my kilt, he said, "It is very appropriate, David, you wear your kilt at every opportunity. It is a symbol of your honour to your country of birth, Scotland, and also your family, the Clan Sinclair." To be honourable was never too far away at any time from Peter's way of thinking. Today, I am not only honoured to be wearing my kilt, but I am also especially honoured and privileged to have been asked to speak to you all on this very special but sad occasion. I am only one of many who was greatly inspired by Major General Peter Boylan. He encouraged both my wife Cece and I in all of our endeavours, and we will be forever thankful to him for his advice, his support, and sincere and genuine friendship. Peter and I, of course, enjoyed sharing quality time together as often as possible, with a wee dram of Scotch single malt whisky in hand. If you, Kathy, the Boylan family, as well as the church, do not mind, I think it only correct I make a toast to my dear friend Peter to assist in sending him on his way. This wee dram is a 16-year-old Lagavulin single malt whisky distilled on the island of Islay, located off the west coast of Scotland, and it was a particular favourite of Peter's. Not only for its taste, it also stimulated both of us to tell many of our true life stories. My toast to you, Peter, is, should all acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind, should old acquaintance be forgot and days of auld lang syne. Godspeed, Peter. Slanjiva. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Massey, and I don't speak like your last speaker. You know, what a beautiful day to say goodbye to somebody that's really a good friend that I enjoyed. And you know, everybody that comes up here has something different to say. When I first met General Boylan and his wife many years ago, I had a good friend of mine. He said, "I understand you met the general. What do you think?" I said, "Man, he has got a cute wife." And look here. And the next time I saw, I thought the same thing. And I still think it today. And I say that, and I'm not just saying that for humor, but look at these first few rows. What a great looking bunch of people. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but you don't just become a general. You don't get promoted to major general without family support. The higher you go in the military, you know, the more everything, including your family, is important. They don't just look at you. They don't just look at your military record or your history. They look at the totality of your life. You know, when you get to these positions, you don't just represent yourself. You represent your army. You represent our country. You're something special. You don't earn that rank by just one specific event. You earn it with a total package, as close as perfection as possible. And I looked at these pictures today up on the wall, and You know, it looked like the old Dallas Cowboys. They weren't just a team. They looked like America's team, you know. You look at this family, it's sort of like the country song. You should have seen it in color. And today, you can look at this family and live in color, and they're special. You know, today, on behalf of Peter Boylan, I'd like to honor his family. Because whatever he meant to you personally, whatever he meant to GMC, whatever he meant to the state or this town or this nation, a part of it comes from the supportive group here named Boylan or some derivative thereof. And I honor y'all today. You know, since I'm a homeboy, I've known every president of GMC since Colonel Thorne. That's probably almost 70 years of that institution. And of all the ones that have had the title of president, I don't know one that faced the immediate burden that Peter Boylan did. You know, while I'm not privy to all the financing and the staffing issues, I've had many people close to the school tell me that it was on the ropes. It was close to closure. They weren't about paying salaries. And you know, I understood him because his management style was extremely simple. And I've worked with people like this before. His management style was support me and I'll embrace you. Help me lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way because the train's coming down the track. And I'm changing GMC. And that's exactly what he did. During his tenure, I watched with awe as he worked. I'm not going to say worked with the governors. He worked the governors. He worked the legislature. He worked the alumni. He worked his supporters to build, rebuild, and develop Georgia Military College back into a place of prominence that we hadn't enjoyed for years before. I don't think I've ever seen a leader of any organization that brought back professionalism and pride to his group any more than he did when he took over Georgia Military College. You know, being a small town boy, I look up and lots of times you'll have a friend of yours that'll die, something will happen, and you'll say, boy, I never had the opportunity to tell him what I thought. And what I'm really glad about today is I've had many opportunities to look him in his eye and say, hey, you and your family's special. Y'all meant a lot to this community. Y'all still do. You mean a lot to our country and especially to our life here in this community. And I do thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. And I'm going to tell all of y'all this for the record. You still look good.
To this wonderful family, to you, Miss Kathy, to you, Emily. General Boylan was my friend. I want to say he taught me how to be a man, but I was already in my late 30s when I met him. But he was one that embodied developing people to be greater than they thought they were. I found a poem by one of my favorite poets, a quote that says, if you're always trying to be normal, you'll never know how amazing you can be. That's by Maya Angelou. That embodied General Boylan's and our relationship. Now, for all of you who had the nice, calm conversations with him, God bless you. He respected me as a man of God, but I was often called to the president's conference room for meetings, I should say meetings, in the early hours. I forgot to tell you, my name is Chaplain David Luke. I'm an ordained minister of 27 years. and I trembled with fear every time he called my phone. He would never call at a regular hour. It was always, David, why don't you come by my office? Let's just make it 7, okay? That's like 7 p.m., sir? 7 a.m. would be fine. And oftentimes they would become the most encouraging parts of my day because he realized that, like him, I love this community. He was overwhelmingly compassionate about the things he cared for. He loved the very fiber of your beings. He compared nothing to you, but loved this country with all of his heart. He was courageous beyond words. If you've ever been in his presence, I don't know if I want to drop and give him 20 or give him a high five, but something happened. He was just that type of man. He spoke most eloquently, and I can never forget the times he asked you all to do stuff. He told me to do it. He would call me and say things like, David, I need you at Central Georgia Tech. Wear one of your bow ties. And I would get there and he would give me things to do. He wasn't over the board at the time of communities and schools. He just appointed me to be on the board, and they went along with it. And along with others, we developed an educational process that helped our community. I pastored in this community for 16 years. One of the most gracious times of my life. During those times, we had factory closures. Families, hundreds of families were without jobs. But not only were they without jobs, they were undereducated. The happiest things I've ever shared with anyone outside of this room was this man cared about everybody. A large number of those factory workers looked like me, and he cared about them. And these are his words to me. Go do something about it. Don't just talk about it, go do something about it. He was that type of man. He was not only passionate, but he was powerful. He extended all of his resources. We became the campus at Flipper Chapel. He extended every resource from financial aid to computers to make it happen for a reading program. Many don't know this, but he supplied financially for us to get to Atlanta to take the GED test when they were taking the rapid test. And here's a story that many of you probably know about me, but one of the people that was in the GED class now have a doctorate degree because of the compassion of a General Boylan. He was an awesome man, but he was my friend. When he called me David, I know I was about to get the words. If he called me pastor, then I could probably drink one of those things that David Sinclair just drank. And I just kept wondering, Sinclair, if you were going to pass him out in the room. This is an honor. This morning at 4:30, I arose to drive to Augusta State College, where I was lecturing this morning. And as I shared with the family, I'm going to make it back. And by the grace of God, the highways were friendly, and my wife is like this. But I would not have missed this honor for the world. I consider General Boylan to be a friend, someone who I can count on, someone who extended his compassion, and his role as a general made me feel important. It made me feel a part of a great success. Colonel Van Horn, you remember the time we were putting together the Lafayette Day. And I don't know if that man ever slept during that time, because we would get calls at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I wasn't even working for GMC at the time. But he was that kind of man. He was compassionate about what happened. So today I just tell you thank you, and I salute your father, your husband, your grandfather, because he was a great man. I could only hope that when it's my time to sail into the sunset, that someone will know the things that honored like General Boylan. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Boylans, all of you, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And please forgive me if I get emotional. I love the General, and I loved your family. I, like you, am honored to have had General Boylan as part of my life. He was courageous in the service of our country for 30 years. Wounded multiple times in Vietnam, he was the senior-most officer who jumped into Grenada, awarded the Silver Star for his bravery, and numerous other awards that were listed on your bulletin. I had the honor to be there when he was inducted into the Georgia Military Hall of Fame. Pretty good for a boy from Wisconsin. We both served in the Army during similar times, he being a very senior officer and me not. We shared stories about our service and occasionally found places where we both served, like we both served in Vietnam at the same time on one of his tours. Both served in Germany, and occasionally we knew the same officers. Obviously, they were senior and I was not. We shared stories about our children and the challenges of our children growing up in the Army across the country and other parts of the world we were assigned to. One of those stories was about Terry going to jump school at Fort Benning. Terry found herself on her first parachute jump, and immediately behind her was her father. I often wondered if she was encouraged out of the airplane. As two families, we often went out to dinner. We hunted together and sometimes fished together. We sometimes traveled together. We discussed many things. Although good friends, had too much respect to do anything but call him General or Sir. There were one occasion when I thought there was a brief moment about how our friendship was going to remain. Going hunting one morning, the General was very disturbed about everything. And I'm sorry to be crude, but to make the situation accurate, after some time I asked him if he's going to be bitchy all day. He looked at me for a long moment, a very long moment, and then said, "Nobody has ever said that to me before." The moment passed, and we were back to normal, and with some derogatory comment about me being an irreverent, insubordinate Army aviator. We often sat in his dining room at the table talking about our service, about GMC, and much about what he thought about what I should be doing for the community. As those of us who knew him, he was very persistent about his opinion. Discussions were often challenging. It took great perseverance and intellect to survive. I was often exhausted from defending my actions, but I was always better off for the conversations. As some of those who have spoken before me, he saved our beloved Georgia Military College. He found the partnerships and resources necessary to rebuild the campus. He accomplished scholastic improvements for the school. He made character a part of education. He created and supported programs to support ethics, character, and imagination, like Odyssey of the Mind. He was innovative with imagination about new programs for the fine arts at GMC. His campus became our whole community. It was he that did much of the necessary work to create the Greenway. He partnered with our local school systems for improvements. He supported programs in parts of our community to improve education in impoverished areas by improving facilities and providing equipment. He encouraged mutual education programs with our other educational institutions. All these accomplishments and more, and these are not his greatest accomplishment. He and Kathy's greatest accomplishment is their family. 5 children and 14 grandchildren. I have had the opportunity to get to know most all of them. In fact, I think I influenced a couple of them to the small displeasure of General Boylan to become Army aviators. All of General Boylan and Kathy's children are special. I have met them all with all their spouses. They are all courageous and successful like their parents. His children, Peter, Greg, and Terry, followed him to West Point. Daughters Heather and Emily have established their careers and their families also. I've also gotten to know a little something about many of the grandchildren. The Boylan grandchildren are all special, like their parents. Elliot, Liam, Tully, Mary have all graduated from West Point and started their military careers. Abby completed a maritime degree and is now sailing the oceans of the world. Michael is in an engineering graduate program. Emily is now traveling the world with United Airlines. For the grandchildren I have not met, I look forward to hearing about your accomplishments as I have your cousins. You are all part of a family that has done great things, and you will continue to do in your lives to do the same great things that your family has. General Boylan was a courageous soldier, our inspired community leader, and my great friend. None of us have to look far or think long about what he has accomplished for our country, for our community, but the most enduring mark is the family he and Kathy created. He has gone the way of all of our heroes into our memories of those who have heroically served our country, our community, and their families. I, like the family, will miss him forever. Thank you.
Let's stand for the closing prayer. God, we give you thanks for the blessings which you bestowed upon Peter in this life. They are signs of us of your goodness and our fellowship with the saints in Christ. Merciful Lord, turn towards us and listen to our prayers. Open the gates of paradise to your servant, and help us who remain to comfort one another with assurances of faith until we all meet in Christ and are with you and with our brother forever. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
My name is Colonel Retired Greg Boylan. I'm the youngest son of General Boylan. So the last time I spoke to a crowd was at my retirement from the Army, and after that time I was lambasted by my siblings, namely my brother, that I spoke too long. And so it was with much trepidation that I was allowed to actually come up and speak today. And I was told that I had to go shorter. And so I will go shorter. Page 1. Call me Ishmael. In truth, my brothers and sisters, as many of you know, and as you've heard from the speakers today, our dad was an avid reader. At just about any point in time, whether at home or in his office or just about anywhere, one would not be surprised to find him reading simultaneously books on history, leadership, character, or even quantum physics. Though for my part, I never quite figured out the draw to the last one for purposes any other than those driven by homework. From my perspective, though, Dad was most fond of philosophy, ethics, and poetry. And I'd like to share 2 poems with you today. First, shortly after Dad passed on Sunday morning, my son and the granddaughter Mary were both there to be with us. They were fortunate to be. And my son was drawn to my dad's bookshelves, and he pulled out this book of poetry from among Dad's collection. He chose the book only because he knew Grandpa loved poetry. He opened the book, and by luck or providence, I like to think the latter, he landed on a poem which Dad had checked. And I think it is very apropos for this occasion, and I felt compelled to share it with you all today, his family, his friends, his brothers and sisters. No funeral gloom. No funeral gloom, my dears, when I am gone. Corpse gazings, tears, black raiment, graveyard grimness. Think of me as withdrawn into the dimness. Yours still, you mine. Remember all the best of our past moments and forget the rest. And so to where I wait, come gently on. The second is a poem/prayer that Dad learned from his dad as a child, which has been up on the screen throughout this ceremony, and which relates to the chits in the bucket that my brother mentioned at the beginning. My dad has made a point to share this poem on multiple occasions with cadets aspiring to become officers in the infantry because it influenced him throughout his life. Just a tiny little minute, only 60 seconds in it. Thrust upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. We are so grateful to all of you for joining us to honor our father and Kathy's husband today. We would be honored once again if you would all please stand with us and join in singing God Bless America.